once there is violence against women, then there is no peace, and therefore that affects every aspect of life in this relationship or in this community, and definitely nationally. We need more regular research, statistics, for us to be able to, provide evidence to, formulate policies, but also to do more appropriate programming, but also have lots of clarity and lots of focus across the different forms of violence. In terms of engaging stakeholders, we have a database, we have lots of statistics. How do we move forward in terms of implementation, in terms of ensuring that we move beyond just the statistics to engage everybody to ensure that we have policies in place and we have appropriate interventions to address some of these statistics that are coming back. So thank you so much.
Well, now we go to Dr. Mildred, and we're interested in you giving your take and policy implications about the presentation for women's economic empowerment.
Thank you very much. Again, Mildred Barungi are my names. I work with the Economic Policy Research Center. I'm a research fellow. I'm happy to be invited to speak about women empowerment in line with the UBOS report. So maybe as a way to begin, I would want all of us to understand who is an empowered woman. What does it mean to be empowered? And according to the agreed position of UN and all of us here, I guess, a woman who is empowered is one who has access to quality education, quality health care, you have decent work, you have access or you own property, and you can participate in economic decision making. So if you are a woman and you can do any of those things here, then you're empowered. I like the fact that the report has brought out these disparities in terms of men and women. They used mobile phone ownership and usage as one of the measures of the assets that women should own or have access to. UBOS has also used land and other property like houses. They've also looked at employment status of women of all categories, married, unmarried, young and old. So to a large extent, yes, they've tried to pick out some indicators of economic empowerment. I want to highlight, like I said, an empowered woman is one who is educated. The statistics presented was correct. As you move to higher levels of education, that's where we have bigger percentages of men and miserably small. Most of the educated people are women. So that gap is real, and of course, with education, that's when we acquire skills, we are opened up to opportunities. So women, in line with our theme of leaving no woman behind, all girls should count, all women should count, it also means that they have to be educated. Something in the education sector needs to be done to make sure that we have parity. Gender parity has been achieved at primary level, but it hasn't been achieved at secondary and higher institutions of learning. Again, UBOS looked at mobile ownership. We all remember the results. When they asked, among those who own mobile phones, or who do not own, it's women. The largest percentage of women did not own mobile phones. And we all appreciate here the use of mobile phones. We use them to access information. Some organizations like Ramini Foundation are using mobile phones to extend agriculture extension messages to farmers. So if women, who are the majority in the farming, do not have phones, it means they're going to miss out on such information. Some organizations like the East African Grain Council is using phones to extend messages on prices, on markets. If you do not have a phone, it means you lack that information. So that disparity needs to be closed. Again, we use phones for mobile money transactions, to pay for utilities, even job adverts these days. So many of them are running from WhatsApp and all that kind of stuff. So if the women do not have the phones, it shows they are missing out on those opportunities. So that is a gap that needs to be closed. And the other thing UBOS looked at was employment, and they were looking at the working status. Who is working? From their findings, they noted out of every 100 unemployed people, about 77 were women. That is very absurd. Out of every 100 unemployed persons, 77 were women. And if women are going to participate in economic decision making and yet they are not working, implying they do not have the money, their voice is less likely to be heard. We all know it here. The one who holds the money, their decisions are taken more seriously than one who will not be having the money. If you are a woman in a home and you're discussing whether to begin a farm or to build a hostel, and yet you don't have any financial contribution you're going to make to that effect, your voice is less likely to be heard. So it is absurd that most of the people who are not working are women. But also when we look on the few women who are working, the quality of jobs, maybe that is one thing that I did not see from the report. UBOS does not tell us of the few women who are working, what kind of work are they doing? You may find majority of them are doing subsistence farming, and that's what they are calling working. So the quality of work, I emphasized at the beginning, an empowered woman is one who has decent work. So if what women are doing is not decent, then we shouldn't even be trying to say they are working. The other last thing they looked at under women empowerment was land and other property ownership and access, which is very key. We all appreciate that land is the major productive activity. Think of any business that you're going to do, any money earning activity that you're going to do, you will need land. Whether you're going to set up a mobile money kiosk, you need some space on land to have it. The report has mainly focused on perceptions about whether people agree women should own land, whether they should inherit land. Yes, the perceptions are very good, but how I wish we had also gathered information on percentage of women who have land titles. In the report, they quote some old figure of 7% of registered land, of titled land, being in the names of women, which again I find not friendly as a woman. Why should it be 93% of the titled land is in the names of men? It has implications. If women do not own the land, most likely they only have user rights. And so their tenure security is not guaranteed. It also means should they wish to access credit, they cannot offer that land as collateral. So it becomes a limitation. If they have big plans, they may not be able to implement them because they do not own the land. At EPRC, we've done a study on how land tenure and security affects investments on land. And what we noticed, what we quantified is for people who are engaged in agriculture, those who had tenure security guaranteed were more productive. They were willing to invest in interventions like fertilizer. They are willing to grow crops. They are willing to grow value addition crops. So failing to have secure land becomes a big limitation on the part of women, implying they are not going to be able to contribute meaningfully to economic development. It is very absurd from the perceptions you found in the survey that most women, irrespective of their level of education or where they come from in Uganda, most men were opposed to the idea of women owning land, implying fathers, husbands, brothers in this room, you're not supporting your colleagues to own land, and yet you know they contribute to the economic development. You need to rethink and go back and support your sisters, your mothers to own the land. And so, very quickly, what I would want to recommend is, we know previously there has been affirmative action to help women try to equal with the men. Such actions are still relevant. They are still relevant because we've compared the men and women, and we still see the gaps. Such actions are still relevant. On the issue of employment, I would recommend that UBOS also looks at the earnings. Compare the earnings of men and women and see, are we earning the same? And also, if I got it well, the survey covered people from 18 years and above. We should also think of including the 14 to 17-year-olds, because according to the Contracts Act, these are people of legal age to work. And most of them, actually, not most of them, a good proportion of them are out of school. So their inclusion in the subsequent surveys would be very, very important. And maybe also there's strong need for awareness creation. The fact that most people still think women should not own land is because maybe they do not know what the land policy says. Women too should have equal ownership rights. So there is need to sensitize people about their rights. And for research organizations like EPRC, it's an opportunity. We are now aware there is this data set that is available. We should utilize it. Thank you.
It is clear that women's participation in politics is very low, so we would want to ask, and we know that women are in the majority in terms of population, so you would want to ask why. We want to thank them for the parameters that were used, but I think the most important thing is that it inspires us to think deeper. Women did not start participating in politics. Of course, we've been given the definition of participation in politics. We have also been given the definition of women's empowerment. So I cannot say that they started at such and such a, no. I think for as long as men and women have existed, organization of societies have existed, I am sure that women have had interest in politics, though sometimes it is not so explicit. So I was looking at women's participation, most especially at high levels of decision making, and we did not have women participate in parliament until about 1954, when 2 women were elected to the Legico, but these were British women. So when it was noticed that it was only that Ugandans were not participating, then there was a women's movement that wrote a letter to the governor and said African women need to be considered. And so in 1958, it was, I think, Visram and Rubega who were elected to the Legico. So that's when we had the first African women participating at that level. Then the first woman minister was appointed in 1973, surprisingly, by Idi Amin. And that was Mary Sekatuka, as Minister of Foreign Affairs. Later, it was to be Rhoda Karema, Geraldine Mutamazire, 1979 to 1980, and then Teresa Odongo Oduka in 1980 to 1985. And then, of course, the NRM came in, and you know that there were, and now I'm going down to resistance councils. They came with the structure of resistance councils. And in these resistance councils, a post for women was reserved, and also a post for youths, and the youth could be a woman, but I doubt how many women were there taking up. And of course, it was a challenge getting women to fill up even these posts. In some places, you had men taking up the post of secretary for women in some of these village resistance councils. Then there was the UN conference, I think it was 1985, before the resistance movement came in. And there was this Beijing conference that agreed that, because the problem was worldwide, that agreed that seats for women should be reserved. And so from there, because we had 39 districts, it was agreed that a seat be reserved for a woman for every district. And these ones were being elected by women councils. So the women would sit and elect women. Am I right here? There were women leaders in the districts. So these ones would recommend to the parties that it would be the party to elect the women leaders, the government to elect the women leaders to represent these districts. Then the National Resistance Movement came in, and you know that we had our 1995 Constitution that that gives equality between men and women. Did I say gives? That guarantees. Rights are given by God. They are only recognized by man. So the National Resistance Movement coming up with this constitution. This constitution was consultative. The process was consultative. So it was recognized that it was necessary to encourage women leaders to participate in politics. And so that's how you get these district seats. Currently in Parliament, out of 459 members of Parliament, 160 are women. But that is only 34.9%. And you must know, all of you, that in Rwanda, for example, there are 38% women. But we always say that for us in Uganda, we have a voice. You are Kamateka, you can stand up and say anything you want. But I don't think it is the case in Rwanda. I think for them, they must voice the position of that party. The district women representatives, if we use, I think UBOS has these statistics. No, I was going to give you the breakdown of those in Parliament, but it's not, I think, necessary. Those directly elected are 122. Then you have 3 army representatives. You have 20 who are representing constituencies. They did not take up the reserved seats for women. You have 2 youths, you have 2 workers, you have 2 representing persons with disabilities. And then you have 9 ex-officials. These are ministers. And out of, how many ministers do we have? But at least 9 out of these were appointed by the president. We have 77 ministers, out of whom 24 are women. And out of the 31 cabinet ministers, 10 are female, representing 32%. And out of the 46 state ministers, 24 are female. Then, of course, you know, we have a female speaker. The whips of the parties are women, and I don't want to be so political. But the parties, now when we went multi-party, it was clear that for you to be relevant in Uganda, you had to have women leaders in the party. So we find that in the party structures, there are women. But none of these parties goes beyond 34. I think the NRM has the highest numbers, but they don't go beyond 34.3. Why is it? The challenges have been given to us. Lack of education, lack of the social cultural upbringing that we have, knowing that it is the man who decides, it is the man who must take lead and decide for everybody. Lack of support indeed, because everybody thinks women should not go into politics. And this one, the men do it. Don't tell me the 5 minutes are over. Out of selfishness. Why do you think that men who are educated do not want women to be in politics? It is because they think that the women are going to compete with them. Even when you look at the socio-economic empowerment, I was going to come to that, socio-economic empowerment. It is the women now who are trying so hard to engage into commerce and all that, and they have a bit of money. They are in the circles, they are in what, but the men are fighting them because now they feel that their ego is reduced. So the women lack the finances to engage in politics, and some, more to a large extent. Then they lack this personal choice that I am Kamateka and I can, for me to be able to stand in politics, I need the money to say, yes, you can go and stand. They lack personal choice. Then also in terms of personal choice, you have this string of children behind you whom you must look after, so you don't have time to go. So what must do that? What can we do? First of all, sensitization. Sensitize all our people that it is important for women, for all of us men and men, to engage in politics and in the governance of our country. 2, root for economic empowerment of women, and to tell the men that an empowered and economically empowered women should be the pride of her husband. So for people to work in partnership for economic empowerment. Then of course to ensure that our children are educated and they finish school. My colleague said that we have parity at primary, but this parity is in terms of enrollment. And there are we have such high levels of dropout out of school of girls. And so we must sensitize our parents that they must be economically empowered and they must prepare for the girls all the requirements that they need and must see their children through school. So the issue of parenting, I don't know whether UBOS, I think I saw something about it, but you know very well that we have a moral breakdown, we have now a breakdown of family structure, and we must make sure that we reinstate this so that the parents can play their big role in affirming the girl child, and this is how we shall stop even sexual violence. I was in a meeting with the judges, and the issue was, you know, how they can facilitate cases of violence against women, so that more cases can be brought to the courts of law. Because if a case is brought and then you begin to ask a woman, did you shout? How many times did you shout? Did you enjoy it? At what time did you? Really? So if you are going to embarrass women and others are listening, others will not come. Things like those. So we need to empower women to ensure that they can speak for themselves. Issues of family planning. Let women be able to decide, I can only have 2 children, 3, 4. So that after giving these children, birth to these children, I look after them as I work, and even when they grow, I can then get on with my life. Thank you very much. Let me comment on use of phones. Yes, we want women to have phones, but have we considered the danger that these phones can pose to these women? Some of them even put them, like they used to keep money in the breast, and they keep the phones there. And this is how women have ended up sometimes with the cases of breast cancer. So, along with the supply of phones, we must make sure that we give them education about the use of phones.
We want to know, in terms of method and indicators, how else could UBOS go collecting this data?
My beginning point would be for UBOS to take a step. First, to review some documents that are relevant for employment. For example, the Employment Act. And try to tease out, for example, indicators like work conditions, earnings of men and women, how the earnings should be controlled, how can women participate in controlling given the little money that they earn, the kind of work that women engage in. That would also be very key, because we know, according to principles of decent employment, there's some kind of work that is too physical for women to engage in. So UBOS needs to review some of these policy frameworks and find out those provisions and incorporate those kind of questions in the regular surveys, like the UNHS, the DHS, incorporate them in those regular surveys so that this information can begin to come through quite often. I think I've answered you.
Yes. Just one small thing, since we also have the 16 days of activism, a comment on the women's empowerment we are pushing through economics vis-a-vis violence. Make a comment on that.
Since it's a comment from Mildred, not from EPRC. That's a disclaimer. Maybe to emphasize, in this forum we've mainly focused on other aspects of women empowerment. We forgot one small aspect of decision making, and that is very key in defining who an empowered woman is. You should be able to make economic decisions. Most men get a feeling when a woman is economically empowered, they are less submissive. That is not true from my experience. I want to put myself in the category of women who are economically empowered. I'm married and I'm very submissive to my husband.
No. Before you return to that, okay, now, can you tell us about your research in EPRC, where we've had sentiments that many women who are economically empowered also tend to attract domestic violence because of the lack of insubordination? And what we can do about this?
We've not done a study on that specifically. The studies that we've done about women, one has been on user rights, land rights and use rights of women, how it affects their productivity. And what I said, we noted that for women who have the rights to own and use land, their productivity was much higher. Specifically regarding whether they induce domestic violence, I'm not aware of that, but my colleagues maybe could help me talk about it, but we haven't specifically found that.
Okay, thank you. We shall have Janet comment on that in addition to her question. Please, Janet, can you suggest other indicators and methods UBOS could have used to document violence against women, considering that you yourself acknowledge that perception was a little bit limiting? And as you answer that, also you remember to capture the economically empowered women attracting domestic violence because of insubordination.
Okay, thank you so much. So I'll start with UBOS and the indicators, and then I'll come back to comment on economic empowerment. As I said earlier, I want to appreciate that, it's important to understand, community perceptions, community attitudes around, a specific phenomenon. And I think it's important that UBOS went out with this module trying to understand what are community perceptions, and they had different, specific indicators around that. But I want to say, just like Sarah poses the question, I think it's not enough for us to only understand community perceptions. We probably need to add more indicators around that. So for example, some of the things that UBOS, maybe in terms of running analysis or maybe shaping more questions, thinking about community knowledge. Perceptions and knowledge kind of go together, but I think we need specific indicators around knowledge so that we know, we get to know, especially around violence against women. What do people think, especially around the forms of violence? What about consequences of violence against, women? What do people know about? So that if we understand the levels where people are, then we are able to, appropriately design strategies and programs. But also probably within knowledge, trying to link what people know around violence against women and other issues. But also moving beyond just knowledge, thinking about perpetration. So I would have loved to see, of course, it's really important that we talked about perception, but probably talking about people's actual experiences and maybe perpetration, so that we understand prevalence. So, we have actual measurements in terms of if we have to come up with policies or, strategies or advocacy points or asks related to violence against women. What is the prevalence nationally? What is the prevalence regionally? What is the prevalence, maybe by district? If we run analysis by district, what is it by district? What are the experiences of women, women experiencing violence? What about men that are perpetrating violence? We can have indicators and set questions that are related to actual experiences and perpetration of violence. But also we could look at indicators around interventions. What is being done and what is it that people can do to support, either support women who are experiencing violence or men who are using violence. It could be small actions or small things that people can do, but what are those? We could have questions or indicators around those, so that. But also, what about behavior? I know that the presenter said this is baseline, and that's really important. If we do comparability across the board, if this is baseline, and probably we'll do midterm, and maybe we'll do probably a huge evaluation at the very end if there are any interventions. How could we compare where people were in terms of behavior at the start, at baseline, as compared to, endline or at the final evaluation? So maybe some indicators around behavior that we can, include so that we're able to assess community behavior, specifically on violence against women in the communities. And we're doing this in linkage to other aspects of life, health, education, to understand the linkages. And then very briefly, I will probably comment on what my colleague was saying. In terms of economic empowerment, I think it's also quite judgmental or quite, lots of blame towards women to think that once a woman is economically empowered, then they are, not submissive to their partners or within their relationship. I think it goes back to perception. What do community members think? What do men think? What do women think? And again, what are the social norms in communities saying? How have women been socialized to believe? If we are hearing this from women, they have been socialized to believe that, when you have money, then you won't listen to your husband. You won't be respectful. You won't wash his socks. You won't, probably make his meal because you think, I teach at Kakere or I work in a hospital. Those are all perceptions, and that's why we are here thinking about statistics, and also we are thinking about interventions. There are a lot of organizations out there that doing awareness creation to push out all these perceptions. We know that relations are based on respect. Relations should be based on respect, should be based on love, and should be based on positive thinking, other than thinking that when a woman is empowered. So probably economic empowerment would help couples or within a relation to make decisions together, to grow their love. Because then they can afford to pay fees for their kids, and they can afford to have the household, provisions. It's not about, submissiveness. And
Yes, thank you very much for that. And it's about mutual respect, and in an ideal world, that is what it should be. But in case it does not turn out that way, I always tell my students, women do not have to apologize for being successful, for being ambitious, for having made it. If they are significant others they live with, respect them and love them for the success that they've made, wonderful. But if they make their successful lives difficult, I think we have to rethink those equations. That's about the panel, and that is about me. It's not you, boss.